You're listening to Small Business, Big Stories, the Queensland Small Business Commissioners podcast with Dominique Lamb. There are more than 482,000 small businesses in Queensland and counting. These are their stories. Welcome back to Small Business Big Stories. I'm your host, Dominique Lamb, the Queensland Small Business Commissioner. Today I'm extraordinarily excited about our guest, Ash Ivory, who runs Ivory Common. Ash and I met probably a couple of years ago now at an event for government of all things where Ash and I struck up a conversation that was just of particular interest to me. And from there, I also learned that Ash was actually a Taylor Swift extraordinaire and has an entire presentation about why Taylor Swift's product is so intoxicating for so many millions and millions of fans out there. So I couldn't resist talking to Ash about Ivory Common and learning a little bit more for our listeners about, how is it that we make a product appealing? How do we attract millions of customers or even just 1,000 customers or just, the ones that you want that are going to be able to pay you? So now, Ash, tell me a little bit about Ivory Common. How did it start?
The easy questions first, Dom. So Ivory Common started a little bit by happenstance, I think. I'd spent 2 years with a company called Askable and built their product function up, which is a pretty common thing to do for software companies and especially startups because they tend to deprive that part of the business because usually the founder is the product sort of brains. And as the company scales, it tends to get a little bit more complex. And I was lucky enough to join Askable on the journey and loved that journey. We went from one founding dev, so one developer, one person that was writing the code for the application. And I scaled sort of the product function up to about 15 people at that point. And I'd done that twice. So I'd kind of done it at Outfit prior to that as well and didn't quite realise that there was a bit of a pattern forming for how I like to, work in that role. And once Askable raised a meaningful amount of funds, I thought, do they really need me to go on this part of the journey? Should I look at doing this seriously? And can I help more people like, the founders of the tech companies that I'd helped prior? So Ivory Common was born out of that, of wanting to help founders really shortcut a lot of the product struggle that I'd seen prior.
Tell me what Ivory Common is.
It is a pretty incredible business that I started on my own. And the most simplistic way that I tend to describe it is that I am a fractional CPO. So fractional meaning I split my time amongst many different clients, and CPO meaning Chief Product Officer. So the majority of what I do at Ivory Common is consulting in a fractional capacity, and that's sort of where I start. I charge usually a retainer for fractional work. If it's workshop, if it's, ad hoc sessions, then it's normally a flat rate. But I think the more exciting part is the experimental side of products and things that I kind of get to build and launch on the side as well. So I am really, really passionate about neurodiversity because I was an adult diagnosed with ADHD. And so time management's really important to me. So I've got digital tools that I kind of develop on the side as well to help people with their time management and how to look at their environment and all of that stuff as well. And then that goes and makes passive income as well, which is nice.
Do you think that your process around sort of teasing out a business's product or service and, what they're going to do with it differs if they're offering a service as opposed to, a product, or do you view them as the same thing?
They're the same thing in my mind in terms of what we're okay, whether it's an experience or a physical product or digital, it doesn't matter. And with product, and this is like a little bit nerdy and technical, Dom, but hopefully listeners will enjoy it. But we tend to, and by we I mean sort of product nerds, we talk about outcomes. So a lot of the time you can kind of fall into these traps of thinking about a feature rather than, the outcome, right? And the trick is, by thinking about the outcome and not just slapping a feature name on it, it means that you stay adaptable. And this kind of goes back to the Taylor Swift, sort of prezzo that I do. And it's essentially about the fact that when you look at, let's use the Eras Tour as an example, she has obviously taken into consideration a lot to look at that tour schedule, and there's all types of things that we don't understand. But lo and behold, the world wanted more. And so for her, the outcome is, how do I give more people the concert experience? Mm-hmm. Yes. And this is where listening to your users or your customers becomes really important, because a lot of business owners, or anyone really who's delivering something, we all assume that we kind of know where their expectations are. And so for me, yes, I missed out on concert tickets. I didn't get to see Tay live, but I would absolutely did settle for the outcome that, we kind of agreed on, I suppose, which was, hey, I just want to see the concert. I'm cool if I'm not there with you, but I just want to enjoy it. And so that as an MVP, or a minimum viable product, that's kind of that concept of going, okay, the feature would have been, how do we get everyone to a concert? The outcome is, how do we allow everyone to experience it? It's such a subtle difference, but it makes all the difference in terms of your mindset and staying a little bit focused on the end goal and not the steps that you think you have to go through, which sometimes can be a little bit more sort of feature focused rather than the outcome. Askable was really tough because we were growing, and the founders had a really clear picture of their culture, and it was a brilliant culture, high performance, really focused on numbers, and that meant we had to make a lot of tough calls, and we did. And I had to let someone go, and it was really hard because she was brilliant, and she's now doing really cool stuff at a really big tech company. But a week after I let her go, I got a card, and she thanked me, and I was just completely floored because I'd never truly had someone take the same kind of experience, that I'd had, and she got it. And it meant that the conversation landed, and I was able to be honest and caring, and it made a difference. And I think they're the moments that you don't often hear about because people have them in solitude. But that was really special to me, and it changed a lot of my behaviour as well after that, where I kind of checked in on people more, or I told people that made a difference in my career that they did. Mm-hmm. And I'd realised that I'd probably kind of not done that enough as well. So it's such a small moment, but that was success for me.
And what's been the hardest thing about running Ivory Common?
Money, cash flow, stress.
Yep.
I'm sitting here mid-separation because it was really, really tough on my marriage.
We hear that a lot. Like, we've had whole episodes about how tough,
Yaz is
small
much
business,
more versed on this than I am.
on how tough it is for small business owners and their marriages, amongst other things, and cash flow and tax debt and, all those things absolutely plays a part, I think, in the sort of the journey of the small business owner, and also the pressure on a small business owner to, support their family and support their employees, or to support whatever it is, or even their community, right? When someone creates a business, and I see this all the time, so businesses will come to me, they might be fledgling, and they'll bring me a pitch deck of stuff that they can do. But very often they have absolutely no idea how much money they need in terms of capital or investment, what they're going to charge, or even what the benefit of having the product or why someone would want to buy it. Do you have a bit of a system for how you look at, a product or a service, where someone says to you, hey, I've got this incredible business, we do all these things. Like, where do you start?
So usually I go the complete opposite way, because when I first sit down with a business, usually I'm sitting down with someone that's quite compelled to be there, normally the founder. And rather than having them talk to me about what they do or their product, which they tend to start doing, I normally ask them, what's on your mind? What's burning? What's the thing that's not necessarily keeping you up at night? Because that may not be something that I can help with per se. But usually in the business, there's something that they'll kind of gravitate towards. And it's interesting because with my role as a chief product officer, so when I'm in, a bit more of a functional role in a startup, one thing that's really important to do culturally is to get people to start to shift their perspective on what the customer is talking to you about and how. And so I kind of use a bit of a discovery technique, and it works all the time. You allow the person to start where they want and you kind of walk them through that way. And so usually that gives me an indication of, it may not necessarily be a product problem, but it shows me a little bit about the founder and how they think. And then a big part of my role is helping them get clear on their vision. It doesn't really matter to me what the product is or where they're going. It matters that, the key people who are creating it or driving it are compelled by it and get it. So that's kind of where I start, is what's blocking them and why. And then if we can kind of determine that, then we can actually take a step forward towards the real product stuff.
So I often find when I'm talking to business owners that the thing that they gravitate towards is not necessarily the thing that makes the money. Do you have to have hard conversations about that? About, ever around,
yes,
this is the product, this is what you want to do, but nobody's buying that part of your business.
Yeah, all the time.
And how do you overcome that? Because I think as business owners, right, we want to do what we love and call it work, but it doesn't pay your bills. So how do you sort of, recast their mindset?
I've often been upfront when I start, a conversation, and also I'm going to press you quite hard. And I had a conversation about a week ago, actually, with a lady, and we were talking about her product and we were kind of going through that process. And I was being quite adversarial with her because I was trying to test just how convinced of her vision she was. But then having that pressure on them allows me to see if they're coachable, because there's a level of that friction that you need, I think, and you want to see that they can back themselves, because they will need to do that in a lot of scenarios. Especially in software, the team numbers get quite large, and so founders can find themselves leading a team of 10, and in a couple of months, if the product's doing what they want, they could be in front of 70, 100 people. And they're critical numbers when you look at culture and things like that. So I'm really digging in and I'm trying to understand how they learn, how they develop their ideas. Are they going to go with me on a challenge, and is that friction good? Or is this part of the reason why they can't quite get out of their own way to begin with?
And if they're not coachable, what does that mean for you? Like, we talk about on this show in particular that sometimes it's really important to sack your clients, right? There are people that, your business is never going to be right for. Is that a process that you use?
Yes, absolutely. And because of, I would say, my ability to point to data, we're so lucky in software that data metrics, we kind of live and breathe it. If they're not on that path and if we're kind of not on the same page, well, that's cool. Maybe they aren't ready to be coachable in a certain way, and that's something personal that they need to deal with. But yeah, I will be upfront and tell them that I don't think it'll work, because in the long run, it's only going to push them further off their product path.
Ash, what's your top tip for a business that is building a product or a service and is about to release it into the market?
Well, if they're about to release it into the market, they've completely the horse is bolted, and so they've missed my top tip completely. But if they've gotten to the point where they've survived cash flow and they're able to get a product to market, I think the first thing that you can do is make sure there is some way for your customers, and whether it's service or not, for them to get feedback to you, right? So if it's just doing the thing that doesn't scale in the beginning, and it's just asking them, how'd you find us? Why did you go with me? Mm-hmm. Those inquiring questions, it's really interesting what people tell you. And this is that kind of discovery process that I was talking about. This is what we do every day, every week in product software, right? It's not that different. Ask your customers about their experience, and that will give you a very detailed list of what they like and what they don't like, and then prioritize that based on your sort of mission or vision or goals or strategic plan. It's as simple as that.
So feedback is the breakfast of champions. We hear lots about artificial intelligence or AI, and it is very much the sexy term that is being thrown around in not only tech communities, but I think small business communities, even government. And there is this sort of view that regardless of what you're doing, you must have AI. If someone is thinking about AI or just doesn't know where to start, what would you say to them?
I would say, depending on their budget, to choose the tool that is the one they've heard the most. So assuming it's going to be ChatGPT, yeah? Mm-hmm. They don't need a subscription, but they can absolutely go that far if they want. And just start asking it questions. It's as simple as that. And it sounds rudimentary, but this is how I started. I started just asking questions that I'd normally ask Google. So what percentage of users, that use this tool may use that, things like that. And it's trial and error. And if they find they're kind of confident in that space and they can start to steer the chat and the conversation, then there's things they can get into around prompt engineering, which isn't that hard.
So it becomes very familiar.
Totally.
Very quickly. And, it is easy to use. It is low cost. And if nothing else, you're just using it for marketing purposes. I mean, it's going to gain you efficiencies. And I think that's the point, right? You're looking for efficiencies in your business that you don't necessarily need to outsource everything.
Yes. And to that point, another way that we can potentially bring people's anxiety down around it is it's really not that different to a lot of other software when you think fundamentally about what's going on. There's an algorithm behind it that allows it to make certain choices. But ultimately, it just kind of works the way that our brains do, and it builds a model and a perception, that it's getting from the information. And so in the same way that you should scrutinize people that you talk to or conversations that you have. I think if you treat it like that and fact check, it just becomes a bit of an extension of, your strategy and how you think can be a little bit more powerful than Google, but it's not going to, I think, scare the pants off that will get a lot of business owners a really long way with a lot of automation if they're interested in that.
And most people are using artificial intelligence anyway, right? So if you've got predictive text on your phone, if you're using MYOB, if you're using Xero, all of it has artificial intelligence sitting in there. It's just not quite as visible. Ash, what is your business mantra? We ask everybody.
I have a few. I've been working on, and I don't want to unpack this too far because this could be another whole episode, so let's not do that to listeners. But I have been forming a bit of a methodology that is words matter. And so words being the psychological component, I suppose, of how I like to coach and what's important when I start to learn about a business. So their schema, their culture, what they mean when they use a certain word. And this has become really relevant, obviously, with AI. But words and then the matter is the physical or the foundational, right? So what are we actually talking about then? What is the reality of, your product or service, and how those two things interact? I'm forming that up, and that tends to be the mantra of, well, what's actually being said, what's going on, and then what's the reality and where are we trying to get to as a product or a team. And so I tend to start with that, literally start a whiteboarding session with that with clients, because we start to get into the detail around what different people on the same team mean by the word success, right? And so words matter, that's the mantra. And then as I unpack it, it becomes quite flexible depending on what, we're trying to solve for in the room.
And of course, the burning question for most of our listeners is going to be, what's your favourite Taylor Swift song?
I knew you were going to ask me this.
Is it because you can't decide?
Yeah, it is. I just...
Really? You don't have two?
Okay, yes, I do have two. I like red and I like maroon or maroon because I kind of feel they're like a Pigeon Pair song, sort of. And I don't know, but I love the lyrics and they're my two favourites.
Well, there you go. So, for our listeners, Ash is very dismayed by my favourite, which is Peter. Of all the songs, nobody understands. But no, I enjoy the storytelling of her music. So
that's why I'm so disappointed. There's so many better stories.
No, it's a great story. It's a good story.
We might have to do a separate episode just about
that. Great. Thanks for listening to Small Business, Big Stories. I hope today's discussion finds the people who need it. And for more inspiration on how to transform your small business, keep tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favourite platform. And if you have a business question for myself or my guests, we'd love to hear from you. Just follow the link in our show notes and send us an email. I'm Dominique Lamb, the Queensland Small Business Commissioner. Until next time.